Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Cheryl Jennison DeProsa, and I'm joined today by my friend and colleague, Shure corporate historian Michael Pedersen. Hi, Michael.
Hi, Cheryl.
Today, Michael is going to be taking us through the history of the Shure Unidyne microphone, a microphone I think many of us are familiar with, a microphone that might be familiar as the Elvis mic, and a microphone that you can see right in front of me and right behind me today. So we're going to be going into the history of this great and unique and special microphone. But before we get into that, just a few items of housekeeping. First of all, as you can tell, we are not broadcasting from our usual controlled environments. We are coming to you live from our homes. So please bear with us if there's any sort of audio or technical issues. I think we've worked through most of those. But if we do run into any issues, just be patient and we'll try and get through those as best as we can. Second of all, this webinar is being recorded and will be available for on-demand viewing. It usually takes us a couple of days to get it edited, so just give us a couple of days, but once it is ready, it will be available at shure.com/webinars. And that is a great website you can go to because it also has a list of all of our upcoming sessions, and it also has a list of all of our past archive webinars. So please feel free to go to shure.com/webinars and view all of our upcoming and past events. Lots of great learning across a lot of great audio topics there. And then last of all, as we go through the session today, if you have any questions, please feel free to type those into the question pane. If you don't see the question pane and you're using the web portal, just look for the circle with the question mark on it and click on that icon to get to the questions. Or if you're using the actual desktop GoToWebinar app, look for that dark gray toolbar that has an orange box with a white arrow on it and click on that orange box and you should get an access to the question pane from there. So ask all your questions and we will get through as many of them as we can at the end of the session. All right, that wraps up all the housekeeping. Let's get into the history. Take it away, Michael.
Thank you, Cheryl. 81 years of the Shure Unidyne. Interesting product is that it's never been out of production for 81 years. We've always made some version, and we still do today. So we're going to talk about the history of that, and we're going to talk about Ben Bauer, who's the gentleman that invented it. Here's a print ad from 1952. I like this ad, the microphone that needs no name. If you look very closely at that print ad, you'll see that the Shure name actually doesn't appear on it. The shape of that microphone has become so recognizable worldwide that it's used on computer screens, all kinds, and sometimes used on even shower curtains. I've seen it, but it's become a trademark for us because of that shape is so recognizable. In 2014, the Institute of Electronic and Electrical Engineers, they bestowed this milestone award on it. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about that because that was a huge honor for us. So here it is. January 31st, 2014, this is a milestone award we got for the Unidyne microphone. The IEEE hands out these milestone awards for ideas, actions, inventions, and projects that changed the electronic world. For example, the Apollo 11 moon landing got a milestone award. And here is ours about the Unidyne. They have all kinds of other ones, like there were ones given for the breaking of the Enigma code. There was one for the development of digital communication. So we're quite proud to have this milestone award 137. You can see it in our Niles office whenever we get back in it. Let's look at the Unidyne as a witness to history. So here is 1948, President Truman and the Unidyne. Those of you who are familiar with American history know that President Truman did win that election, even though the Chicago Daily Tribune said he didn't. And the Dewey defeats Truman headline there is a famous photograph. And there's the Unidyne right on his elbow, and that was being picked up. This is on the back of a train car, by the way. Here's Dr. Martin Luther King and the Unidyne. This is I Have a Dream speech from August 1963. There's a Unidyne in the left corner with an arrow, but also look, there's another Shure microphone there called a Commando Model 430, not one of our more popular microphones, but they had a controlled magnetic element inside of it. And we are pretty certain that the actual PA feed for this event came through the Unidyne that you see there to the left. Elvis was shown so often with the Unidyne that is often called the Elvis microphone. We hear the larger one. We'll talk about the sizes in just a different. The larger one, sometimes called the Fat Boy. It's also called the Elvis. And of course, Mr. Sinatra used it. This is a Unidyne 2, the smaller one. He first used it with Tommy Dorsey in the 1940s and used it throughout his career, eventually switching to an SM58 later on. Even generals. This is the signing of the peace treaty with Japan at the end of World War II. And that red arrow there points to a Unidyne 1 in front of General MacArthur. He gave the address to the assembled people through the PA system using that Unidyne 1. Also, Bob Hope, who did, of course, many USO shows starting with World War II and going all the way through the Vietnam War and beyond, used the Unidyne. This was published the day after he died. Of course, it shows a Unidyne shedding some tears for Bob Hope. We actually contacted the cartoonist, and he sent us the original artwork. What did he ask in return? He wanted his own Unidyne, so we sent him a Unidyne too. But this actual artwork is in the Shure archive. And then there are the people that basically emblazon the Unidyne on their bodies. If you go to Google sometime and do an image search, you just put in microphone tattoo, you will find page after page after page of microphone tattoos, almost all of them Unidyne. I was at a trade show, I can't remember how long ago, and somebody comes up and said, hey, I've got a Unidyne tattoo. You want to see it? And he showed that on his right arm. And then on his left arm, he showed me the polar pattern. And then he opened up his shirt and he showed me the frequency response on his chest. Now, I like working at Shure, but even I wouldn't do that. But there are fanatics out there that love the Unidyne so much they will tattoo it on all parts of their bodies. So let's talk about the genius behind this. He was 24 years old, and he took a very circuitous route to get from his birthplace to Shure. So let's talk about, in the next photo, it will be Mr. Ben Bauer. And here he is, Benjamin B. Bauer. He was the inventor of the uniphase acoustical network. So the uniphase network is what makes the Unidyne a directional microphone. And here's Ben in 1945. But how he got to Shure is just an amazing story. I'd like to share that with you. So Ben was born Benjamin Baumschweiger, that was his born name, in 1913 in Odessa, Ukraine. And what you may not know about Russia at the time is that, but that's okay, that slide's fine, Cheryl, that's all right, is that it was involved, this was like post-Russian Revolution, but there were called White Russians, which were still loyalists to the Tsar, and Red Russians, which were loyalists to Lenin. And they were having civil wars all throughout Russia, and including the Ukraine. So this caused the Baumschweiger family to move from Odessa to Warsaw in 1923 to escape the Civil War. They got to Warsaw, they were there for 2 years, but really there was a great amount of anti-Semitism in Poland, and they figured out that they had to leave there as well. They took a short journey over to England, London. They were in London for 6 months. And this was basically a temporary stay as they were making their way to the United States. Age 12, they moved to Havana, Cuba. This is something interesting. I had no idea, but at the time, in the 20s, the United States had an immigration quota, particularly for Eastern Europeans. And they would only let in so many of the year. I don't know how many they let in during the year, but a lot of these Eastern Europeans went to Havana. And actually, in the 20s, Havana, Cuba, had a huge European expat community there, and they would stay there until they could get into the United States. So it's age 12, and Ben has lived in Russia, Poland, England, and now in Cuba, and he's only 12 years old. Age 16, this is one smart guy. He moves to New York City. He has a relative living there, and he attends the New York Electrical School and the Pratt Institute. At the same time, he's learning English. Imagine going to college, going to a new country, getting into college at age 16 and learning English at the same time. And this is the type of guy Ben Bauer was. 3 years later, he goes back to Havana. He's got a 2-year degree in industrial engineering from the Pratt Institute, and he becomes a two-way radio repair technician. You have to realize, in the 1930s, two-way radio was a brand new technology. Of course, it was used for police and fire and taxi cabs and so forth. So he becomes a radio repair technician, and this gets him interested in the electrical engineering aspect of audio. Age 21, now in 1934, and he goes to the University of Cincinnati to pursue a degree in electrical engineering. Why Cincinnati? Well, again, he had some relatives there, but also it was one of the few universities in the country that offered a degree in electrical engineering. So he starts out at age 21 to work on his undergraduate degree in electrical engineering. Here's his class schedule. I just look at this. If you look at it closely, you can see that he has probably 3 to 4 hours of lab work every day. This guy just loved to be hands-on and working in the lab. He has physics labs, he has electronics labs, and this is basically just what he loved to do. And you can see at the bottom, Benjamin Baumsweiger, dorm, University of Cincinnati, room 403. I just like that. So here is what happened. 1935, and Shure was formed in 1925, in case you don't do this. In 1935, Mr. Shure asked his chief engineer, a guy named Ralph Glover, if he could locate college students that would be willing to do a co-op program. A co-op program is where you work at a company for a period of time, go back to school, go back to the company, back and forth and back and forth. Fortunately for Shure, because I can tell you our history would be much different if this didn't happen, Glover went to the University of Cincinnati. And so he contacted one of his professors and said, hey, you got some students down there that might be willing to work in the microphone field? Here's a letter from Professor Addison back to Ralph Glover, December 24th, 1935, and I'll just quote this. We have all decided on one of our junior students as having the qualifications for your work. The man's name is Benjamin Baumsweiger. We thought that the rate of pay for him should be about $12 a week. Wow, what a bargain. So Ben accepts that job very quickly. You can see it's only a week later. And this is a letter from Professor Addison back to Ralph Glover. It said, I'm having the bearer, Mr. Benjamin Baumsweiger, report to you for the position you have open in your engineering department. I put in blue, I hope that he will prove satisfactory in your work. That has got to be one of the biggest understatements of the entire Shure history. He was amazing, and you'll learn more about him as we go on. So, age 23, he starts his job at Shure. He gets a salary of $15 a week, and basically he does 8 weeks at Shure, 8 weeks at the University of Cincinnati, back and forth by bus until he gets his undergraduate degree in electrical engineering. So he's a student and doing basically an apprentice job, if you will, at Shure at the same time, working for Ralph Glover, of course. He graduates at age 24, and he's immediately hired by Shure as a development engineer in 1937. Here's a meeting in 1937 of the Shure folks. So there's Ben Baumsweiger still sitting on the left, Maurice Cope. Next, he's our engineering. Jack Berman was our sales and marketing. And there's Mr. Shure, our owner and president and owner. Now, Mr. Shure in that photo is only 35 years old. He lost his hair prematurely. Interestingly enough, he looked very old when he was young, but when he was old, he looked very old when he was young, but when he was old, he also still looked young because he hardly ever changed. He looked that way till well into his 70s. A very important day, November 19th, 1937. This is from Ben Bauer's lab notebook. This is the first entry in his lab notebook that describes the uniphase acoustical network. The following arrangement seems to offer possibilities. Yes, Ben, I would say it did. When I was looking at these notebooks, and by the way, these notebooks were lost for 60 years and were only rediscovered about 4 years ago in offsite storage. Imagine my excitement when I found these. So I'm going through these things page by page, and I get to this page, 165, and I see single crystal cardioid element. He wasn't working on a dynamic microphone yet. But there's that network drawing that's right below the red arrow, and that I knew that immediately. That's the uniphase network. And this literally is the day he first described how you could make a single element directional microphone. It's really exciting to see such a history thing like this. So here's his first operational Unidyne prototype. Yes, we have all the prototypes. This is the first Unidyne microphone that actually did the directionality he wanted. What was interesting, though, it had no magnetic field because he took a horseshoe magnet and he stuck it to the bottom of that to create the magnetic field. But that shows you how crude the first Unidyne looked in 1937. Here's the second one. Now he's made it round, looks a little bit more finished, got some screw terminals on there. But like the first one, again, it still did not have a magnetic field. You had to stick a horseshoe magnet on the bottom of it to power it up. The third is probably my favorite. Notice that there is a winding there. That's because he made it into an electromagnet. And he made it into an electromagnet so he could vary the magnetic field to see what worked best. Unfortunately, on this prototype, the aluminum diaphragm and the voice coil are missing. So if you see the red arrow there, that actually shows you where the voice coil would go in and where the aluminum diaphragm would have been. So really the microphone is kind of pointed at you. But that's my favorite one, just because it doesn't look anything what you think about what a microphone looks like. Here's a paper he did in 1938 called Further Work on Unidirectional Dynamic Microphone. Again, this started out, his uniphase was originally for a crystal microphone, and then he soon realized, reading through the notebook, that a unidirectional dynamic microphone would work better. So there's a drawing there that's kind of, just to the left of the network drawing, and you can see it shows the voice coil and shows the actual diaphragm and so forth. That's really the first drawing we have in a published paper, actually it's published in Journal, of the Unidyne microphone element. So we saw the third prototype. Here's the fourth prototype. Now you can see how really that's come together. He's figured out what the magnetic strength should be, and he's basically substituted a permanent magnet with that. The tiny arrows there show, if you look really closely, those are the actual voice coil leads, and it has an aluminum diaphragm. Microphones now in general are mylar, but mylar wasn't invented until the early 50s. So back then they used aluminum for the diaphragms. Next one, here's, back one, Cheryl. Thank you. There you go. So you can see number 4, that's a triangular one. Number 5, he basically added springs and an outer ring. So you've probably seen old carbon microphones where they have a outer ring and then springs actually suspend the element to give you some vibration isolation. That's what he was trying to do with that. Notice that the aluminum diaphragm is really dented. That's just because it's been abused over the years. I thought about getting in there and trying to pull it out, but then I just said, nah, we won't touch it. Thinking Antiques Roadshow. Oh, if you hadn't pulled out the diaphragm, it'd be worth much more. So let's go on to the next one. So here he said, well, the springs didn't work very well, and he basically got rid of them and went on to the sixth diaphragm, or sixth prototype. And you'll notice the sixth prototype is, the arrow shows you kind of like some brown paper around there. I was really confused by that. Went back to the lab notebooks and read that he was trying to increase the high frequency response. He thought the microphone sounded a little dull. They thought that putting this brown paper around the diaphragm might help with the high frequency response. Turns out it didn't work, and he got rid of that. Now we're up to literally the one that became the finalized one. So here's the sixth diaphragm, and then there's the actual seventh, if you will. This is the last prototype. Notice the springs are back. He just came up with a different way to do it. And the brown paper is gone. So there's kind of what the final one looks like. And I think the next slide will show us actually likely the same photograph. But there it is. That's the actual element that's found in the production units of the Unidyne 1 Model 55 from 1939. So we went from industrial design prototype right there, by the way, that's the way it was going to look. That's a carved wooden prototype, probably from 1938, painted in silver, that we didn't know even existed until we moved from Evanston to Niles. And when we did that, someone crawled underneath the anechoic chamber in Evanston, which had been there from 1955, and found a box. And we pulled out the box. In it was this prototype with a note that said 1938. Didn't say Unidyne because we hadn't called it Unidyne. They had 1938 prototype for directional microphone. So that's what it was going to look like. So we went from industrial design in 38 to final production in just 2 years. Pretty amazing. Let's look into some details. I love doing history because I keep finding new things. So I wanted to find out what was the inspiration for the Unidyne name, where that come from, where the appearance come from, and who created the Unidyne industrial design. Not the operational design, that was Bauer. So the origin of the Unidyne. 1924, the Unidyne basically described a newly developed AM radio circuit from Great Britain. Now, Mr. Shure was a very serious AM radio hobbyist, and when Shure started, it was actually a place that sold AM radio parts. So he likely kind of filed this name away, and it was never used as an AM radio term. So in 39, we developed a single element moving coil dynamic unidirectional microphone, the Model 55, and he pulls his name up. Either he, had saved it, or it's like, oh, that's a cool name. But it basically means this: uni is for the single mic element and the unidirectional pattern, and dyne is for a dynamic mic element, and it's also a unit of force used in acoustics. So 94 dB sound pressure level is the same as 1 Pascal, 1 Pascal is the same as 10 dynes per square centimeter. So basically a dyne is about 0.001 gram, 1/1000th of a gram of pressure. Now, we used that term Unidyne for years, but we didn't trademark it until July 1960 when Shure was granted that trademark, and that trademark is still in force today in 2020. So there's what inspired the look of it. I saw that, I just said, oh my God, that looks exactly like a Unidyne. That is a 1937 Oldsmobile Coupe 6. If you ever watch The Christmas Story during Christmas time where little Ralphie wants the BB gun and his dad has the car and it breaks down with a flat tire, look at the grill. It's exactly the same model, and it is based on the Unidyne. It has the same amount of horizontal grill spaces there, ribs, if you will. And SM was a loyal Oldsmobile customer. And I could just imagine, I don't know this to be true, but he could have walked out in the parking lot one day, looked at the front of a car, his or someone else's, and said, that looks pretty cool. Let's make the microphone look like that. But who did the industrial design? I only found this out last year. I've been looking for this for years. And it's a guy named Wesley Scherer. And Wesley's there in the front row, seated with his hands folded. There's an arrow to him. And there's also a longer red arrow to Ben Bauer, who's, of course, we already talked about her, Ben Baumsweiger. Wes was not a Shure employee. He was an independent contractor, and he was doing graphic elements for us and letterheads and so forth. And Mr. Shure said, hey, you want to design a microphone? And look what he came up with. Later on, by the way, he worked for Play School Tools in Chicago as a head of design. But the Unidyne, without a doubt, was his most famous design of his entire career. 39, we introduced it, March 39. And in that same mailing, we introduced the Unidyne Model 55, which was priced at $45. And today, that would be about $835 in today's currency. But we also introduced a Rocket Model 50, which is our ribbon microphone. Quick story on that. I always thought our earliest ribbon microphones were in the early 1950s. And I got something, a friend, a vintage microphone collector, sent me a ribbon 50. And I was going to open it up because it said it was a dynamic microphone. I was expecting a voice call, and I opened it up and it was a ribbon microphone. We called them moving conductors. We did not use the term ribbon. I don't know why. Maybe ribbon was copyrighted. I don't think so, but I think perhaps the reason we called them moving conductors was that ribbons were considered relatively fragile. And so maybe we just call it something else. So our first, in 1939, we introduced our first ribbon mic, the Model 50, and the Unidyne 55. Here's an ad from 1940s. I just happened to like it. It shows the Unidyne dynamic microphone, and above that, the Uniplex, which is a crystal microphone. Uses the same exact uniphase acoustical network to make it directional. But one was crystal and one was dynamic. Of course, the crystal went away very quickly. The dynamic, again, we still make today in 2020. Here's the patent that Bauer got. For those of you who want to read more, if you want to jot that down or take your phone out and take a photo of it, 2237298. 2237298 is the actual patent. You can find it online. There's a network down there. It says figure 12. That is the same network that I saw in the lab notebook. And this was granted in 1941. And this is Ben Bauer's first patent. Eventually, he had over 100 patents to his name. 1941, this is Bauer's first paper for the Acoustical Society of America. Notice it's hard to see there, but his name now has been changed from Baumsweiger to Bauer. He just wanted to be more Americanized. People had problems with Baumsweiger, so he took the BAU from the front and the ER from the back and just changed it to Bauer. He eventually became, by the way, the president of the Acoustical Society of America. So this is his first paper that he ever wrote for the Acoustical Society of America. After 20 years, he rose to be the vice president of engineering, and then he was hired away by William S. Paley to work at CBS, the CBS Research Labs. In the mid-50s, Shure had worked with CBS in secret, basically, to develop the M3D stereo phonograph cartridge to play the stereo LP record that CBS was working on. And this is how Paley met Bauer and basically hired him away. In 1978, he reached age 65. CBS had a mandatory retirement. He had no choice. He had to retire. He retired with over 100 patents to his name, and less than a year later, he died of a heart attack. Basically, his sons told me if he couldn't work, he wasn't happy, and there was no reason to live. I also asked his sons, what what did he feel is most important work? He worked on sonobuoys, particularly the hydrophone aspect of sonobuoys. Sonobuoys, starting in World War II, were dropped into the ocean. They would track submarines by sound, and then this information was sent up by RF signals to observation planes. So Ben worked on the hydrophone portion of it, which is basically, hydrophone is a microphone that works underwater, if you will. The next slide we're going to go to will show you a hydrophone from World War II that Ben worked on. So this is kind of cool. This is a World War II era hydrophone. If you look at the diagram, lower right-hand corner, it says hydrophone. So that's the actual portion that picks up the sound in the water. The rest of it's a transmitter, a battery, and so forth. And these things only lasted for 3 hours. They weighed about 14 pounds, 4 feet. They would drop them in the water. They would work for 3 hours, and then they would self-scuttle. They would sink to the bottom of the ocean. So Ben worked on these starting in World War II and worked on them all the way through the Cold War in the 1960s. So just to get into some fun now, Mr. Cleese says this, I'm going to do a silly walk, and we're going to look through some history of Unidyne microphones, and these are just all the microphone models we've made throughout the years. So let's take a look. There's the Unidyne 1, model 55 in 1939, the Fat Boy, the Elvis microphone, whatever you want to call it. That's the thing that started it all. 1936, we had a Shure logo that we still use today. I just like this logo because if you look at it really carefully, you'll see on the left-hand side, there are some wavy lines. So those are supposed to be sound waves. Then there's the Shure S in the middle, but it also could be a signal generator, if you will. And then on the right side is a voice coil. So reading from left to right, it is basically a microphone. If you turn it upside down or read it from right to left, it's basically an earphone because then you've got the voice coil and the earphone creating audio there. So this was first used in 1936, and we still use it in 2020. In fact, if you look at our current Unidynes and some other microphones, right in the middle of the grill, there is a miniature version of this very, very cool logo. 1947, this is the Unidyne 1556. What's different about it? You got to look at the base. The base actually has a shock mount built into it, so an isolation mount. The early ones did not. So there's, you can kind of see the outer grip, which is got some vertical ribs on it, and then there is you can't see it, but there's actually rubber inside there, and then the base of the microphone goes through that. So basically, this was a one for broadcast, and it was designed to reduce the amount of vibration noise coming up through the mic stands. Here's a 556 we've got in the archives. This actually survived a fire in Longview, Texas, called the Rita Theater. This was a mic that was being used for live broadcasts from there. I'm not sure what the crap is that's all over the front of it, but basically you can see it went through a pretty hot fire. It was still operational when it came out, and the radio station sent it back to us around 1951. We did an ad there, burnt up, but still alive. We have this microphone in the archive still. It still smells a little bit like smoke, but it still is operational. 1951, early 50s, television came about, and television liked the Unidyne, but they thought the Unidyne 1 was too large, and they wanted a smaller version of it. So we brought out the 55S, and the S simply means small, and it's about 66% of the Unidyne 1 sides. In the next slides, we're going to see how those slides, old and new, compare in size. So there you go. There's the Unidyne 2 on the left and the Unidyne 1 on the right. You can see the Unidyne 2 is substantially smaller, will hide less of the person's face when they're on TV. And let's look inside the microphones as well. And there you see the Unidyne 2 versus the Unidyne 1. You can see the diaphragms are about the same. Transformers inside there are about the same. Shock mount has been reduced dramatically in the Unidyne 2. And also they went to an Electromagnet, which is also more powerful, being smaller. So they could reduce the shock mounting aspect of it, and they reduce the size of the magnet by still using a more powerful magnet, and that allowed us to get it down to the size of the Unidyne 2. The Unidyne 2, by the way, is the size that we still sell today. Here's the Unidyne 2 55SW. What did the W stand for? Remember what S is, small, and W basically was for switch. So they didn't want to do SS. That was probably a little confusing. So they just took the second letter and switch and put that on there. So 55SW, nothing but a Unidyne 2 with a switch. Some bling. Here's the 55SG Gold. G stood for gold. And by the way, you had to pay an additional $15 if you wanted it gold plated. The gold plating was very, very thin. Obviously, it would have to be, otherwise the microphone would cost a fortune. And most of the gold-plated microphones, if you handled them a great deal, they would eventually wear off. So the gold-plated microphones didn't stay around very, very long unless they were given as a gift or people just didn't put their hands on them. But that was 1967 for the SG, the gold version. 1978, we bring out the PE, stood for Professional Entertainer 55SH. So PE, Professional Entertainer. H stood for XLR connector. Why did we use H? It was interesting. Well, it turns out that one of my colleagues has been there around long enough, and she told me, well, we had just used G for gold. H was next, so that changed H, the XLR connector. That just was the next letter in line. 89, we went to the 55SH Series 2. So we've got here a new element, and this was a much simplified element, and that's why we changed the term to Series 2. It was just to designate that the outside looked the same, but the inside was different. And here's what the Series 2 looks like. 2009, the Unidyne 2 Super 55. Notice the blue foam. The blue foam is the same color as the original Unidyne 2 grill cloth. When we brought out this 55 Unidyne 2, 2009, Super 55, we had people criticize it online and said, well, that was dumb. Why didn't you make it black like the original grill cloth? Of course, it wasn't. We went back and we did the research, and we found out that it was blue. And there's a side story in that before we go on. One thing that always confused me about the Unidynes is I would look in the catalogs, particularly in the 40s and the 50s, and it would never say what color was the grill cloth. I didn't get that. And I had different variations of that. Research turned out for a very practical reason. We would go down to a local fabric store, not far from where actually Shure and Evanston was, and they would bring a device that would measure the acoustical impedance of cloth. Basically, you'd take a piece of cloth, hold it over this device, it would blow air through it, and you would see how much air got through it, and that would measure the acoustical impedance. They would measure cloth after cloth, or bolt after bolt of fabric that was always solid color, of course. And when they found something that worked, they would buy a bolt of that cloth and would use that cloth until it ran out. So what colors were approved? Black was approved, brown was approved, red was approved, and blue was approved. They tried white, but the problem with white is back then so many people smoked that it would turn yellow fairly quickly. So when you go back and you look at Unidyne 1s and Unidyne 2s from the 40s and the 50s, you will find them with various colors of cloth inside, but the catalogs never described what color it was because they never knew when that bolt of cloth would run out and they'd have to switch to another color. But I happen to really like the blue. I think the blue is just one of the best colors we ever had. Here's inside of the 2009, this Super 55. That is based upon a Beta 58. So one of the reasons we call it Super 55 is because it's a super cardioid as opposed to the cardioids. And this is a look inside of that. You can see the blue cloth, or blue foam, excuse me. By the way, we use foam instead of cloth because, first of all, foam actually takes the shape better, but also it's more consistent as far as acoustical impedance compared to a cloth. But this shows you how simplified it is, and it is based upon a Beta 58 supercardioid. Not exactly the same, but based on it. Here's 2010, the Super 55 BCR. That's for black chrome, red foam, and I believe this is the one that Metallica uses, if I'm not mistaken. This is a limited edition, and once they were sold out, they were gone. So this is 2010. 2014, which is the 75th anniversary, we went back and we recreated the original size of the Unidyne 1. Now, the molds all were gone, so we basically had to do this all from scratch. We have a very, very talented engineering staff and machine shop that basically went and recreated everything. We had the drawings, but we didn't have any of the original tooling, if you will. So we created this limited edition. It was 5,000. We made 5,575. 5575 means 55 was the model number, 75 was the 75th anniversary, and we made 5,575 of them. Story on this, most of the time when you work at Shure, if you want to buy a product, you can get it as a discount because you're an employee. But these were only sold through dealers. And that basically means you had to pay retail price or the MAP price or whatever. So I wasn't going to buy one for myself. And then my wife said to me, he said, well, geez, you wrote the history of the microphone. You've done so much. Don't you think you deserve one? I said, okay. I said, well, if I buy it, can I put it in the living room? And of course, like any wife, she said, no. So, but they're still available. You get them on eBay, but now they're about $600 or $700 if you find one. 2017, that was the last time we did a limited edition. This is called the pitch black version. I think Cheryl might be using that one. I'll ask her later. But we plan to do other limited editions in the future, depending upon what happens. So that's kind of a menagerie of the model Unidyne 1 and Unidyne 2 from 1939 to 2017. Let's see. I think the next slide is the audio demonstration. Cheryl, yes. So Cheryl's going to take it over now. I'm going to let you hear two audio demonstrations. One is the voice of Ben Bauer. For a guy who invented one of the most famous microphones at all, it was very difficult to find any recordings of him, interestingly enough. And then we're also going to let you hear some microphones from the past, starting with a 2014 microphone and working backwards so you hear the audio quality differences. So let Cheryl take it over from here.
Harry, first let me say that I am just delighted to be on your program again after all these many years, and of course you know that I have spent the last 5 years developing and perfecting the SQ quadraphonic system. And the SQ system, like any other legitimate quadraphonic system, requires 4 loudspeakers. However, we had discovered some years ago that with a good set of stereo earphones, you can enjoy quadraphony just simply by listening to the sound of an SQ quadraphonic record, or of course an SQ encoded program. And at the appropriate moment, I'll be delighted to explain how this comes about. Good.
And that one's done. Michael, did we lose you?
Yep, I'm sorry. No, I'm here. Can you run the demos now?
You got it. Hold on.
Thanks. Sorry.
And I noticed some people are complaining about some volume. We would advise plugging in some headphones for these, just the way that GoToWebinar delivers video files. So apologies for the low levels. And just a heads up, when we do the edited version, we'll make sure we pump up the volume. So if you want to listen to these back when we have the edited version, we'll have them a little bit louder for you. So here is the audio clip of the microphone sounds from 5575 all the way back to 55.
This is the Unidyne Model 5575 from 2014. This is the Unidyne Model Super 55 from 2009. This is the Unidyne Model 55SH Series 2 from 1989. This is the Unidyne Model 55S from 1951. This is the Unidyne Model 55 from 1939.
Cheryl, can you run that one more time? Would it be difficult?
Not a problem. Here we go again.
Yeah, let's listen. Let everybody listen one more time.
This is the Unidyne Model 5575 from 2014. This is the Unidyne Model Super 55 from 2009. This is the Unidyne Model 55SH Series 2 from 1989. This is the Unidyne Model 55S from 1951. This is the Unidyne Model 55 from 1939.
Perfect. Thanks, Cheryl.
You're welcome.
What strikes me about these when I hear these is just how good that 1939 microphone sounds. And it just reminds me that, you hear all these recordings from the 30s and so forth, and you think that, wow, the entire audio chain must have been that bad. Well, it turns out the microphones are quite good. RCA ribbon microphones from back then. And so what we get used to hearing is the scratchiness of the 78 records or the wire recorders or whatever. But the actual microphone quality was pretty darn good. And you can tell between the 2014 and the 1939 microphone, yeah, they sound a little bit different, but not that much. Let's go on to the next slide, please. So there's some of you that might be interested in this material to have it. There's actually a 48-page book that I wrote. It covers pretty much everything in this presentation, but it doesn't cover West Share, because when I wrote the book, I did not know about West Share. So if you want to write down this Google search term, or take your phone out and copy it, it's Shure Answer ID 2715. Shure Answer ID 2715. If you put that into your Google search engine and hit return, it will take you to a page. And at the bottom of that page, there are two booklets, PDFs, free to download. One was written in 1995 for the Unidyne, and then the more advanced one was 2014, which I put together with all the information about Ben Bauer and the Milestone Award and the grill cloth, including colors of the grill cloths and so forth, and everything I could find out. So there it is. Again, Shure Answer ID 2715. Take a look at that. And then let's go to the last slide, and so I can wind it up. Then we'll start taking some questions if there are any. So 81 years after introduction, still a microphone that needs no name. And just so you know, that actually the outer appearance and the design of the Unidyne is a registered worldwide trademark of Shure Incorporated. So I'd like to thank Julie Snyder, who helped with the archival research, Stuart Van Dorn for a lot of the photos, Google Images for some of the other photos. And now I guess we are open to questions. Are there any, Cheryl?
Yeah, we do have some questions. Oh, sorry, unmuting my mic is a good idea. Yes, we do have some questions. So let's run through those really quick. So first question, how many Unidynes have been produced since the inception?
I wish I knew. I have no idea, because we've moved 4 times. There have been lots of purging of sales records and so forth. It's just unknown. I don't, millions and millions, I would say certainly that's the case. But how many, we really don't know. It's sad that we don't, but it's just what happens when you're 95 years old. Someone decides, get rid of those records. We don't need them, and they're gone. And then like 20 years later, you say, gee, those records go. So sorry, just don't know. I wish I did know.
No worries. And real quick, I'm going to answer. You had mentioned the models that I'm using. I am using, to speak into, I'm very fortunate. I have one of the BCR models, which is pretty hard to find these days. And then behind me is the pitch black version from just a couple years ago.
Yep, very cool.
All right, next question. So you kind of touched on this, but just a deeper question. Yep. I have a Unidyne 1 Model 55 that has the red cloth behind its grill. I understand that the various colors of cloth were used during its production run. Can you identify its production year by the color?
No, that's, again, something that was lost. They just didn't, they would do what were called engineering change notices. Engineering change notice would basically be something that would not say, oh, we don't have this part. For the next 3 months, we're going to substitute this. And so they would do that. Those were put as engineering change notices, and we just don't have that type of record. If you do download the book, it does show you all the different colors of cloth. And we actually found, believe it or not, we found original colors of all the cloths that had never been exposed to light. So we basically could match those up to Pantone colors, and we did that. I think it's on the second to last page in the book. It shows you. Unfortunately, though, the colors do not necessarily go back to a year. In 1 year, they might have used 2 or 3 different colors, depending on how many microphones were sold.
Great. All right. Next question. Is there an output level difference between the 1 and the 2?
Yes, there was. And I have to go back and look. I don't actually have that information there, but one of the changes they made in the 2 was they went to an Alnico magnet, and that gave you an output level. So I'd have to go back and look at the specs. If you wanted an exact answer, I would suggest maybe send me an email. Easiest way to do it is just support@shure.com. Just say Michael the historian. They'll know what it is. And then I can go back and look at the differences. But there was a slight difference between the 1 and the 2. And then I know probably halfway through the 1950s, a new magnet type came out, and then also the output level went up then as well. But I have to go back and look at the specs.
Great. All right, next question. What was the original connector before the XLR?
It was the Amphenol. Amphenol made there was a 4-pin and there was a 3-pin. The 3-pin, interestingly enough, was wired just like an XLR, where 1 was ground and 2 and 3 were hot and cold for a balanced connection. We also used a 4-pin for a while, where you actually would take the 4th pin would be high impedance unbalanced, so you could select the impedance at the equipment end rather than at the microphone end itself. So we kept the Amphenol connector because that was really a pretty popular mic connector from 39 till really we got rid of the last Amphenol in the 70s. The XLR came on the scene, or it was interesting, called the X, and then it was the XL for locking, and then XL for a rubber insert they put into it. XLR came on the scene in the early 50s, and we eventually changed over to that in the late 70s totally. But the Amphenol, there's nothing wrong with the Amphenol. It was a good connector. It just didn't, you had to push it in, and there was a threaded ring that you basically sent. So it basically probably took you, 5 or 6 seconds to connect versus the 1 second of an XLR. So it basically faded away, but they were made by a company called Amphenol, 4-pin and 3-pins.
So the original Unidyne had an Amphenol connector.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. All Unidyne 1s had Amphenols. All Unidyne 2s had Amphenols until we got to the H version, which was in the late 70s.
Okay. Can you still get replacement blue cloth for the original Unidyne 2?
No. There are some restorers that do that. And if you go onto our FAQ site, and again, if you can't find it, send a support at Shure.com. We'll help you. We can give you some of the restorers names. But no, we don't have that. We have the blue foam, but the cloth really, it's what was available. Foam technology wasn't that good back then. Foam technology now is far, far superior, which is why we use foam. It's very controllable as far as the impedance of it. But no, all that cloth stuff is long gone.
All right. I don't know if you can answer this one. I think it's probably a question more for Chris Lyons, the man who recorded them. But what was the distance of the speaker from the mic in the audio demos?
I was there when he did it, and he was approximately, let me think, probably about 6 inches.
Great. Okay, let's see. Oh, this is a good question. What models can we purchase today?
So let's see now. Not on sales anymore. Well, Sherry, you could jump in. We can purchase the Super 55.
Yes, the Super 55 and the SH Series 2.
55 SH Series 2.
Yeah.
I think the pitch blacks are all gone, right?
I'm not sure about that. You might check with your local dealers. They might still be available, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I know that I think at one time, I think Sweetwater had kind of the final 55, 75s, but I think they're all gone. But as far as what's the regular production is, Super 55, 55 SH Series 2, both in regular production.
Great. In the case, is the case or body of the original Fat Boy identical to the newer remade version? Hard to say.
It's really close. It's really close. Could you take the front end off of a 5575 and put it onto the rear end of a Unidyne 1? Never tried it. I know the guy that did that, Mike May, and he was pretty precise. It wouldn't surprise me if it fitted, but I'm not certain it would be exactly the same. A lot of things change over the years. So we tried to make it look as much as possible. I've never tried it. It might, but I don't know for certain.
Great. What years was the 55C made?
55C. That would have been early 40s. In that book, if you download the book, it will shows you all the different model numbers and when they were made. 55C would have been, ABC. A was really low impedance. B, back then, B was medium impedance, 150 ohms, what we call low impedance now, and C was high impedance. So 55C would have probably been first introduced around 1940, 41. It's in the book.
Okay. Next, someone wants us to discuss the 556S Professional.
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of that. One more time.
Somebody wants us to discuss the 556S Professional.
Yep. 556S.
Yeah.
You froze up, Cheryl, so I'm not sure what went on there.
Yes. Okay. Am I here? Can you hear me?
Yeah. 556S.
Yes.
1946, 47, I guess. I'm sorry. Yes, that's the small version. My apologies. That would have been later. That would have been in the late 50s. And basically, it was a 55S with that same shock mount that was in the 556, the original 556. So all it was a 55S with that shock mount base put on the bottom of it. So again, aimed at the broadcasters. And that came out again, I think around 56, 57. I'd have to look into the book exactly.
When did the cardioid cancellation of the Unidyne start to have competition?
Well, we had a patent on that for 17 years. So it would have been in the mid 50s. So that's when the patent went off. Right. Now, just for the listeners, the uniphase principle is pretty much used in nearly every directional microphone around the world. It's not used in figure eights because figure eights don't have that. But if it's a cardioid element and a single microphone capsule, it is almost always certain a uniphase principle. So again, 17 years, so 56, the patent would have been gone, and then we would have started getting competition from probably Sennheiser and AKG would have been one of our first guests.
Great. Can you talk a little about what the original retail prices of some of the various models were?
In the book. Sorry, I don't have it memorized, but again, download that book. Was it Shure Answer ID 2715? And it shows each of the models, and each on those pages, it shows you what the original retail prices were when they came out.
And just for everybody, I'm going to go ahead when we send the follow-up emails. We'll send a follow-up email once the recorded version is available with a link to that. We'll also send the link to that where you can download that book. So we'll make sure you all have that link. Look for that email sometime probably late this week, early next week.
Great, thanks.
All right. Is the Unidyne heavy when an artist uses it today in performance? I actually want to talk a little bit about this because I was actually having some trouble figuring out how I was going to hook up my 55 for today's session. I usually use it more for live performance. And so yesterday when I was doing the rehearsal with Michael, I was holding it, and it did get a little heavy at a certain point. Like towards the end of our rehearsal, I was like, and that was about 20, 30 minutes. I was like, this is a little heavy. So, I mean, I think some people do use it, in their hands. And there are, there's a quick release accessory that you can get for it. And people have talked about making it wireless. You can sometimes find like plug-on transmitters. We don't currently have one to make it wireless, but it does get a little bit heavier. It's definitely heavier than an SM58 is.
Oh yeah, you could also make it wireless. You can also get that little accessory cable we've got, which is an XLR on one end, little 3-foot cable, and then plug it into a body pack. So you can just basically do that as well. But yeah, I think most of the people had it on a stand. Elvis would take the stand and tip it back, and like he was going to kiss a girl or something like that. And and Sinatra did. You also have to realize that back then, in the 40s and the 50s, for example, they didn't want you to move the microphone because they had just found the sweet spot for it wouldn't be gain before feedback on stage, which is why singers would walk up to the microphone and then walk away from it. So most of the time, the actual moving around came with Unidyne 3, SM57, 58, which came in the early 60s, late 50s.
Great. When did Shure transition to using Mylar diaphragms?
It would have been the early 50s, because that's when Mylar was invented, and we saw that came out, and it was just a great material. It was more reliable than aluminum. It didn't dent. So when that came out and we saw it's useful, so I would say 52, 53 would be my guess.
Okay. What advantages does the solid metal surround have?
Solid. I mean, they very little. Actually, acoustically, it's not a good idea. It just happened to look really cool, and it's not a design that we would use today, because all those little slots and so forth cause a lot of diffraction, particularly at the higher end. And you also want to have a microphone that's called symmetrical around axis. If you think of an SM58, and you put a pencil down the middle of it, you can rotate it like it's on a rotisserie, and it looks the same no matter how you return it. That's called symmetrical around axis. You can't do that with a 55 because it's not symmetrical around axis. And when you make it symmetrical around its axis, the polar pattern is more consistent. You get better gain before feedback. So literally, there isn't any advantage of it except the fact that it looks really cool.
There you go.
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly which model he's referring to, but what might be the acoustic difference between the SM58 and this retro unit?
Oh, maybe like the Super. He's probably talking about the Super 55.
Potentially, yeah.
The Super. Yeah, let's imagine he's talking about the Super 55 and a Beta 58. All right, so first of all, SM58 versus Beta 58, cardioid for the 58, super cardioid for the Beta 58. But we assume that the person's asking about the Beta 58 and the Super 55, the Beta 58 will have a better polar pattern because, again, symmetrical about its axis, where the Super 55 is not symmetrical about its axis. So all things compared, if you put them on stage and you had a Beta 58 and a Super 55 side by side and you started cranking up the gain, it is very likely that the Beta 58 would not feed back as earlier. I mean, the Super 55 would feed back earlier than the Beta 58. That's the primary difference.
And I'll also say anecdotally from my impressions, the Beta 58 cartridges are a little bit brighter
Okay.
than the SM58. I
All
tend
right.
to prefer the warmth of an SM58 on my voice because I have a very bright, edgy voice. But,
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
that's all. Sound is so subjective. So
Absolutely. Yep. Exactly.
all right.
Good question.
Does Shure rebuild the older models for customers?
No, we don't have the parts anymore. We basically, when we discontinue a product, we guarantee usually 5 to 7 years of replacement parts, and then after that, guys who are in business for 95 years, we just can't keep all those parts around. So there are guys that basically, and I think they all are all guys that basically will buy parts off of eBay and then rebuild the microphones. Again, if you want to find some of those people, support at Shure.com to Michael, his story, and I'll put you in contact with some of them. But we do not. So if we get like a microphone, let's someone sends us back a 55S from the 50s, and it requires more than just resoldering a wire or something like that, we'll say to them, well, for your old microphone and a certain amount of money, we'll give you a Super 55 or 55S Series 2. But no, just don't have the parts anymore.
All right. Next question. How can I clean the silk on a vintage 55?
Just first gently.
I was going to say very carefully.
Very, very, very carefully, because it's held in by glue, and that glue will let go fairly easily. I wouldn't use anything more than just very gentle soap and water, and just be really, really, really careful, because if it comes off, I don't even know what the glue was. It was probably based upon some type of animal glue, would be my guess, considering when it went in there. But man, I'd almost prefer you not to touch it rather than try to clean it. But if you do, just be very, very gentle and very careful.
All right. Anywhere where we can see in person the various models. I'll answer part of that. I'll say for current existing models, you can reach out to a local Shure authorized dealer. You can visit Shure.com and find a dealer locator, and they should have them on site. Just call ahead and check.
Yep.
General dealers like Guitar Center tend to have some of the models on hand. And then in terms of the vintage models, I think that's a different case.
Yeah, well, we have an archive. Unfortunately, it's not open to the public, but we use it for our own research. But all the photos that you saw were taken with microphones from the archives. But look on eBay. I mean, a lot of these Unidynes were made. I mean, as I mentioned, probably millions of them. And a good quality Unidyne 1, let's say it's in really good shape, and the zinc is not pitted and so forth, and operational, probably $300 to $400. Unidyne 2, because there's been more of those, probably $200 to $300. So you can find them online on eBay. Almost any day you're going to see probably 50 to 100 of them for sale. But all the ones you saw in the actual presentation were taken from our archive.
Great. How can I tell the year of a 55? It has a 4-pin screw on the connection.
Yeah, that's not enough to go by. There were some time, for a short period of time, we used a very simple 4-digit serial number. So if something said 5532, it meant the 32nd week of 1955. So if you've got a four-digit serial number, look at it and see if the first 2 digits make sense for a year, and then the last 2 digits would be the month of the year. Other than that, a lot of the early date coding has been lost. If you want to send me a photograph of your microphone with details, again, send it to support@Shure.com. Attention, Michael Pedersen there, Michael the historian. I can look at it and I can give you a good estimate. But sometimes we just actually don't know the model or the exact year.
Great. Is there a list of famous recordings that use the early models of this mic?
We don't know, because we weren't at the recording studios. We do know that Sun Studios, which of course recorded early Johnny Cash and early Elvis Presley and so forth, used 55s. They have some of those microphones still on display. But, a microphone gets sold and then it goes into a recording studio, and recording studios don't call up Shure and say, hey, we're using your 55 today or your SM58. So we just don't know. You can see photographs. Photographs, of course, of live performances are one of the ways to look at things like that. But inside studios, we only know that it's somehow it comes back to tell us that. So I wish we did, but we just don't.
Next question. I have a Unidyne 1 serial number 105 that I use on the air. Is this a first-year serial number?
Wish I knew. 105 could be. It's a model 55. It didn't say 55 anything else. If it doesn't say 55A or B or C, it could very well be a 1939 or 1940. Again, photos of it sent to me. I'll be glad to give you an opinion on it. But I would say pretty good chance of that being a 1939 model.
Okay.
Pretty cool.
Are you aware of any Unidynes used for historical speeches that are displayed in museums?
Our museum or anyone's? I don't know, because see what happens with these things is, like, typically when a historical speech is made, they don't know it's historical. So consequently, they get moved on. Like the microphone that was used for the I Have a Dream speech for Martin Luther King. That probably was a local sound company that came out, and that was in their rental stock, and they threw it up there. And after that, it went next. So the only way that would happen is if it was somehow set aside because someone knew, oh, that was very historical. For example, in the Shure archive, we have microphones that have been used at the White House. We know what presidents they were used with, but we don't know which actual microphone was used where, because, for example, the White House Communications Agency owns 400 SM57s. They don't keep track of which SM57 was put up where. So I think that the one microphone that we have at Shure that we do know was used is we have an SM56 that was used by Jimi Hendrix at the Monterey Jazz Festival, which is pretty cool. But that, the fact that came to us was really a long tortured story.
Next question. My 556S cloth looks purple even on the backside. Is that a known color?
It's faded. It was blue originally. If you find microphones, some of them have kind of a brownish look. That was originally a red, and then the purple was a faded blue. So if he's never taken the grill off, it's just they're taking the front grill off. It's just 4 screws. Don't lose them, because we don't make those screws anymore. Be very careful. But you can take the grill off very carefully and look, and you'll see the cloth that's been hidden by the chrome ribs will not have faded. And you'll see that was the blue, and then the purple is just faded due to the light. I've got a beautiful 50 model 55S from 1951 in blue at home, and believe me, I keep it out of the light.
All right. Were any custom models made for radio or TV stations or performers?
We did some gold ones. We did gold microphones. They were typically Unidyne 3s that were given to performers with an engraved name on. I saw one just recently that was Eric Clapton. I'm not aware of any that were done. Typically, radio stations would take a microphone and then just put their call letters on top of it by basically a badge that went around the microphone. So I've never seen, going through the archives, anything that was special. Can't say it wasn't done, but if it was done, it was not documented for us. So I don't know. I can't say for certain. I would say maybe, but we've never seen them.
Okay. Next question. Are the transformers in the mic shielded in some way, and has that changed over the years?
Yeah, it has changed. They're better shielded now. The original ones, God, what's that term I want? I can't remember. I'll think about it later. But there's a term of mu metal. That's it. Mu metal came up, which is a metal which offers magnetic shielding, and that helped reduce the hum levels of the microphones. But the original ones, not, if you look inside the original Unidyne 1, you'll see that the transformer is pretty much sitting there. Of course, the actual metal shield of the microphone helped. Right, the actual case of the microphone helped, but they have become better shielded over the years. Originally, not much, because mu metal, I don't know when mu metal was invented, but it wasn't around in the 1940s.
Okay. Is there any documentation available regarding the correct method of assembly and disassembly?
Perhaps. We have 500 boxes in offsite storage that have not been looked at for 50 years. And maybe some of those assembly drawings are out there. Right now, I don't have them. They may be there. It's a long-term project that we're trying to look at to go through this. But all we would have now is the assembly of the current Super 55 or the 55SH Series 2. Unfortunately, those are considered trade secrets, and we don't let them out.
Okay. We own a Super 55. How can we date it?
I'm not sure what the model. The first thing I would do is look inside. You have to take the grill off and see if you see any numbers stamped on the probably the plastic. And if you do, send a photo of that. We might be able to do it. See, our serial number schemes have changed. Sometimes they've been serial numbers, sometimes they've been date codes and so forth, and there really isn't a consistency. That's what happens when you're 95 years old. Things change over the time period. It's one thing. It's not any older than 2009 because that's when we brought it out. But there could be a date code stamped probably on the plastic inside. If you do see that, send it to us and we'll see if we can identify it. Our service department may know that because sometimes they want to know how old the microphone is.
So related.
Not easy.
Yeah, not easy. So related question, why didn't Shure retain copies of the serial numbers of these mics to make them easier to date?
Just because we do so much stuff. 95 years, guys, hundreds and thousands of parts. Stuff just gets lost. And we didn't know the Unidyne was going to be a big success, So believe me, as a historian, do I wish it was the case? Absolutely. But we didn't. We were busy being in business. Think about this. World War II comes along, right? 2 years after the Unidyne comes out. And believe me, everything got dropped and we went into full scale production for the war. They didn't care about things about keeping tracks of serial numbers because they had the war to win. So you have things like that happen and just stuff gets lost. I would wish that there was stuff, just didn't happen.
A lot happens in 95 years.
You better believe it.
And we have a very, very deep archive, but we don't have everything.
Nope.
And Michael is always on the hunt for more.
Yep.
So he is he's our archaeologist for sure.
That's right.
All right. I'm not sure exactly which connector. Maybe they're asking about the Amphenol. Which pin was hot back then, 2 or 3?
Lost you again, Cheryl. You froze.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Which pin was hot back then, 2 or 3?
2. It was wired just like, but if it's a 3-pin Amphenol, pin 2 hot, pin 3 return, hot, cold, pin 1 ground. If it's a 4-pin Amphenol, pin 3 was hot for low impedance, pin 4 was return for low impedance, pin 2 was hot, high impedance, unbalanced.
Okay. Next question. I have a Unidyne 2 model 55SW. The switch plate is a little different from the one that you showed. Has Shure and on-off. It does not have the model. Were different switch plates used?
Yeah. That changed over the years. Suppliers going in and out of business. Sometimes they do things just to change up the way it looks for marketing purposes. Someone might have said, "Oh, just on and off. Why don't we have the model number on it?" Oh, let's do that. And then we just started stamping out. Those are just little aluminum plates that just stamp model numbers. I'm sure that's changed many, many times over the years. I love that our listeners here think that we're so rational all the time. But we're a company filled with people with different ideas, and sometimes things just get changed because someone thinks it's a good idea. So that doesn't surprise me that that's changed. Or it could have been, again, we might have had an engineering, special engineering notice where they just said, we can't get it from this supplier. We accept this. So we can say, no, it's got to be that exact, or we'll take it with just on off and we'll ship those for 6 months and then change back. So.
Okay. This next person must be a friend of yours, and if not, they probably will be soon. I collect old mics and own around 60, including 20 Shure. Is there any way to get interesting information on other older models?
Yes. Contact me.
There you go.
Actually, there is one thing to say. On our FAQ site, there is, if you go to the Shure FAQ page and you put in vintage catalogs, you will pull up vintage catalogs starting in 1932 onward. And so that's the first place to look because there's a lot of good stuff on that. But if you have something specifically, you can contact me. And with that many microphones, probably a phone call is better. But just, again, do it to support at Shure.com, Michael the Historian, and we can talk. But that's a lot of microphones. But, not to make you feel bad, but there was a guy in Milwaukee named Vpat who had the most amazing microphone collection I had ever seen, and it was over 2,000 items.
Impressive.
It was astonishing.
Impressive.
Yeah.
All right. Next question. Are the empty housings sold anywhere?
No. I mean, you can find things on eBay, and they'll say, for parts only, but that's it. But if there are companies that are making the housings, we would go after them because the housing is a trademark. And so consequently, that would be illegal. You would be basically violating the trademark. So if there are Chinese companies knocking them off, we will find them.
Next question. What is the material of the microphone chassis?
It's zinc. Zinc.
All right.
Chrome plated zinc.
All right. Next question. Does the sound of a 55 change when you put your hand behind it?
Yes. Well, you'll change the polar pattern. First of all, you'll get reflections off your hands, and those reflections come back delayed in times, and that will change it as well. But also, it changes the polar pattern, and that's the most damaging aspect of it. That messes up the polar, and so you'll find that, for example, the microphone might work perfectly well without feedback when your hand's off it, and then you put your hand behind it. It starts to feedback because you've now messed up the polar patterns. Yes, it will change. Yep.
Should we do a little test here? So,
yeah, go ahead. Yeah, let's see if it changes.
So here I am without it, and here I am cupping it. So I don't hear a major difference.
No, try cupping with both hands just to see.
Check one. Oh yeah, that changed for sure.
Yeah,
it definitely got more tinny. I'd say if you want to put, obviously it's a great mic to hold. So, if you're going to hold it, I would say hold it like this, or definitely just don't cup the whole thing, because then you get that nice sort of foghorny kind of sound. Hi, everybody.
The nasal sound. Yeah, exactly.
All right. What about the Shure Model 51? Does it predate the Unidyne?
No, 1947 was the Unidyne, as it is the 51. What would we call that? Monoplex? Sonoplex, I think it was. That was originally, basically, 1947. You can look in the Shure catalog in 1947, see it. It is an Omni mic. You notice the back of that is closed. So with the back of it closed up, you cannot use the uniphase principle. The back has to be open. So that was 1947. And of course, we lifted that design and we use it exactly for our new motive microphone, the MV51, which is just not us, but ripping off the archives, going back and seeing that Model 51, saying, oh, that's cool. Let's make it to the MV51. But yeah, 1947. And I think it was a crystal mic originally.
Fun side note about the 51 MP, if you didn't know, Justin Bowler, one of our support guys, uses one for his calls. So he has
really?
Yep. So if you're all over on a video,
an MV51.
No, an original 51.
Oh,
so you should video chat him sometime in the next week. I think you'll get a kick out of it.
God, I love it.
Is the original connector still available?
Boy, that's not from us. And I got to tell you, they're getting rare. Because there was a company that was making the Amphenol connectors. And I just learned from Tom Ellis is a vintage mic collector in Dallas who just knows a lot of stuff. And he made cables for many years with the original Amphenols on there. And he told me that it was either the 4-pin or the 3-pin. He's having a hard time getting a hold of it now. So they're going away because there's just not much demand for it. So I would guess that if you see one, grab it.
All right. Next question. Any plans to bring back the original larger 55?
I don't think so. I'm not in product marketing. We've got the mold because we made it for the 5575. There's really no advantage to it except for the look of it. The smaller one actually works better acoustically. But we respond to market pressure. So if you start writing our marketing department, say, hey, let's get that big one back. Possibility. We could put so many cool elements inside of that now. I haven't heard of anything, but doesn't mean it wouldn't happen.
And I'll put on my PR hat and say, as a private company, we don't talk about really what we may or may not be coming out with, but we are always working behind the scenes to, expand and improve our product lines. And as you can see, we do come out with limited editions every once in a while. So you never know one way or the other.
Yep. I simply don't know.
It's probably for the best.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
Next question. Is the SH and the Super 55 the same size?
Yes. That is, the grills are the same. In fact, there is a kit you can buy if you want to drop in the Super 55 element into a 55SH chassis.
I did not know that.
Yep. It is retrofittable. You can upgrade your 55SH Series 2 to a Super 55. I can't remember the part number is. Applications engineering could help you with that. But yeah, you can buy the part and drop it in.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Can you explain why both the 3- and 4-pin Amphenol connectors were used often in the same year?
No, I can't. As a matter of fact, I do know that the 4-pin allows you to choose the dual impedance. Gave you dual impedance, high impedance and low impedance. But I've never been able to figure. I've never get any rhyme or reason out of that. I would guess one thing is that on the professional stuff, like for example the ribbon microphones and so forth, you don't need that to be high impedance. They were probably 3-pin Amphenol's only. But other stuff that might have been used for, like PA systems or bands and so forth, maybe that was the 4-pin because you might have the high impedance. So it probably was the intended market for it. But good question. I agree. And it drives me crazy, too, because I always have to ask, 4-pin Amphenol. By the way, there was a 1-pin Amphenol as well. It was the MC1F, which is like a little solder dot. And then you had to screw those on there as well. So there was a 1-pin Amphenol, 2-pin, 3-pin, and 4-pin Amphenols.
Awesome. Is there a way to polish or clean the metal chassis of the mic I own? And do you have a recommendation of a product to use?
Man, as far as if it's pitted, there's nothing to do. You can't clean that pitting off. Other than that, I would just look at what you would buy for a chrome cleaner for a car, chrome bumpers, and use something like that. But don't use anything abrasive because you'll scratch it.
Okay. Next is sort of a comment about from a super fan that actually has a BCR version. And he mentions that the use of the 55 grill on the face of the medical droid in Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back, and says that in the future, he wants us to throw it up now. Unfortunately, I can't get out of the presentation at this point.
Yeah.
But if you want to see that, just look up the 2-1B medical droid, and you will see a grill used on a Star Wars droid. And Michael, you should maybe think about adding a screenshot into the presentation just for fun.
Did you know that? Did you know that off the top of your head? You geek, you.
This person did, yes. I didn't.
Not you.
Yeah, okay. I didn't know the droid's name, but I do know if you look up Star Wars medical droid, there is the one that has and it basically just kind of looks like that.
Yep. I think Gino, our resident Star Wars guy, was the first to show me that. Okay. And my wife knew it too. She's a big Star Wars fan. I was like, yeah, okay, whatever.
Awesome. All right. Okay, we talked about that. Sorry, we have a couple of sort of questions that we've already answered, so I'm just kind of going through these.
Okay.
Was the internal...
Thanks for all the questions, by the way. This is fun for me.
Was the it's kind of like a test for you. We're testing your metal, Michael.
Yeah.
Was the internal shock mount used to help develop the first Shure handheld mic, like the 545?
No, really, it's quite different. I will tell you this: Ben Bauer, the guy who developed the Unidyne 3, which is the 545, 565, was a guy named Ernie Seeler. And Ernie Seeler came here in 1954, and he worked under Ben Bauer for a couple of years. I know Ben and Ernie came up with the idea of the pneumatic shock mount. So in a 545 or Unidyne 3, there's actually air trapped in the handle, and that air in that handle actually helps cushion the microphone. That was not done in the Unidyne 1 and Unidyne 2. Those are all either springs or rubber, or actually like rubber feet, if you will. So the Unidyne 3 is quite different. So I'm the uniphase principle. The acoustical network was from the Unidyne 2 to the Unidyne 3, but the actual shock mount that's in the Unidyne 3 was all completely new and is in the Unidyne 3 patent.
Okay. Did Shure ever produce any ribbon 55Ss? And if not, why not?
No. We made ribbon microphones, but they were not in that same capsule. So the first Shure Unidyne, the first Shure ribbon was the Model 50 from 1939. And then there were the actual later ribbons. The thing to note on the ribbons, and all the ribbons we've done, is that if you put a ribbon inside the 55, there's just not enough air or pop protection in that. So if you look at all of our ribbon microphones, like from the 50s, they have little tiny holes, lots of little tiny holes to stop you from going, and blowing off the ribbon. You would be easy to do that inside the 55 or inside the 55 capsule. So it just wasn't the proper housing to protect a ribbon. Could have done it, but I think that was the fact that the 55 was just so well known, and the microphone that needs no name. It's a little bit like a Coke bottle. You don't mess with it.
Great. Are there any copies of vintage assembly drawings of the 55 series mics for people doing restoration?
Maybe off-site. I've not found them yet. Again, there's those 500 boxes that need to be gone through, and they could be off there. Unfortunately, when they put these off-site things, all they did was on the outside they would put engineering, human resources, and there was no more than that. So literally, to know what's in there, you have to open them up and look at it. The fact that we found the Bauer lab notebooks on our first jaunt out there was just serendipity. That was Mr. Shure going down. He said, "Look at that box." You know? So right. I have not found the vintage drawings yet.
Okay. Where can I find a 3-pin female Amphenol connector to male XLR?
3-pin to male XLR. I'm not certain. There's a guy that makes adapters that are Amphenol to XLRs on eBay. I can't tell you where that. I bought one a while ago, and I can't remember if it was 3-pin or 4-pin. I think it was 3-pin. And just if you did an eBay search and you put it in Amphenol XLR adapter, you'll probably find them. And I think he offered 4 pins and 3 pins. So that's a lead. If you can't find them, again, you can email me. Sure, support@shure.com, Michael Historian. I might be able to look it up.
Great. Was the golden version introduced in 1967? Michael said 1976. And what about the PE55 version from 1970?
I think if I said 76, I was wrong. The gold version was in the late 60s, so it was probably 67. And the PE was nothing different. So a PE mic had a different label, said PE instead, came in a little white lunchbox carrying case, was wired for high impedance, and had a cable in it that had a proper connector on the microphone end and a 1/4-inch jack on the other side. So they were aimed at the music stores. So if there was a 55 SG and then a PE 55 SG, the only difference was the label, the carrying box, and the way it was wired. So there was a gold version. The gold versions didn't stay around very long. They just, the gold just wore off too quickly, and we didn't like that, and neither did the customers.
All right, next question. Do the vintage Shure mics, such as the 565 SD and 545S, use Anico magnets? A-I-N-I-C-O?
Elnico.
Oh, thank you.
A-L-N-I-C-O.
Oh, that's an L.
Elnico, yes. They use Elnicos. The betas use neodymium, which is a higher magnetic field strength at the same weight. But the 545s, all Unidyne 3s use Elnicos. Again, you get a winning combination like that, you don't go back and mess it up. I mean, we could put in, you could put in probably neodymiums in there. I'm not a microphone engineer, but as soon as you do that, people would complain it was not the same. So again, if you're not old enough to remember the whole new Coke, old Coke fiasco, that's a perfect example. When you got something like a 58 or 57, you don't mess with it. But those are Elnico magnets, right?
Can we use a 55 for recording purposes?
Sure, absolutely. I think they, I think they sound pretty cool. They don't have the extended high end. To a certain extent, they sound a little bit like a ribbon to me, just because it's kind of a rolled off high end. But yeah, by all means, they've been used for all kinds of recordings.
Next question is for me. What model Unidyne are you using? It sounds very good. Well, maybe it might be for you. I'm using a 55 special edition BCR, which is basically the same element as any Super 55.
Yep. I'm using an SM7B, which is a Unidyne 3 with a little bit different rear acoustic chamber. But SM7 is just like the hot podcasting microphone now. Yes. Amazing. The microphone's going to be 50 years old soon, and it's more popular than it's ever been.
Indeed. All right, let's see. Sorry, just going through these here.
This is I love this. This is fun.
Oh, this one might be a serial number that you might be able to place. I have an old 55 S series number 5527. What vintage year was it made? It has black faded cloth.
Yep, 1955, 55, 27th week. Yeah, so, that's when the serial numbers were easy. Black faded cloth, maybe black. We didn't use black that much. I mean, not feasible. The best thing to do, again, take off the grill, don't lose the screws, and look at the color of the cloth hidden by the actual ribs, and you'll see what the color was.
Okay. Did the original 55s have the articulating head?
Yes. Yeah, that's always been part of the design. Indeed.
Okay. I'm not sure about this next one. What's the story about Shure making 55s for other companies like Duquesne? I don't know if we've done that. Have we? Oh, we have. Okay.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we made OEM microphones. So OEM microphones, original equipment manufacturers, are when another company comes to you and says, hey, you know, we make a two-way radio. We need a mic to go with it. We make a tape recorder. We need a mic to go with it. We make nurse call systems. We need a mic to go with it. So, yes, we made them for Bogan. We made them for Duquesne. We made them for Stromberg Carlson. We made it for a lot of different companies. Now, there were no differences except for the model number that we put on. We put a label on it. It might say David Bogan and a certain model number. But we didn't actually change the microphone inside any. All we did was we changed the label, changed the model number. And, of course, it would also be, you know, bulk packaged. We would send probably 50 of them all, not in individual packagings, but like, you know, wrapped and things, because they would packaged with their products. So we made it for Motorola as well for the two-way radio. Yep. So we made, you know, quite a few OEM microphones. OEM microphones are they're not well documented in our archives because they were considered the property of the company that bought them. So, for example, when Duquesne stopped buying these microphones, we would send the drawings, whatever it was, to Duquesne. And then they were responsible for doing the actual servicing as well. So, but yes, we did make them for other companies. Yep.
Just to follow up to that microphone collection you were talking about from Bob, it's actually now owned by producer Sylvia Massey, and they're doing a museum in Seattle for it. And there's 1,200. This person has Bob's old mic book, 1,200 pages of old microphones. Sounds like light reading material for you, Michael.
Yep. Actually, when Sylvia was on her way to visit Bob's collection, she stopped at Shure, and we talked quite a bit about the collection and what it's doing. So it's in really good hands. She really appreciates this stuff. I know that if you go on eBay, there's something I think it's called Sylvia's Audio. She's starting to sell off things now that were duplicates, things which are not core to the collection. The core things she's going to keep. There were a couple things that Bob had that I really wanted. Sylvia doesn't want to give them up. Darn.
Oh, well, maybe someday.
Yeah, maybe someday.
You can go to the museum when it's open.
That's right. That's right.
All right. This next question you might have to help me figure out. The transformer inside the mic is for isolation or step up? ? Any frequency losses?
Both. It basically does step up the signal. It changes the impedance. That steps up the signal level. It turns it from, you know, of course, it's balance coming off the microphone, so it doesn't change that. But some isolation aspect of it. And yes, you can get some high frequency losses as well, depending upon the core and how it's wound and so forth. But the primary purpose is to step it up and to isolate it. So you're correct. Good question.
Okay, next question. What upgrades would you make today in development of a mic?
Wow.
I think the core of that is more just to kind of show with a microphone like the Unidyne and the Uniphase principle, how, you know, it's really kind of the basis for all cardioid directional mics right now.
Well, let's talk about the KSM 8. How long did it take us to develop that?
Yeah.
I mean, the concept of the dynamic microphone is pretty well established as far as how it works. So there can be changes in material, like better magnets. There can be changes in the material that make the diaphragm, and so forth. But our KSM 8, which is really one of the first big breakthroughs in dynamic microphones in a long time, took us 7 or 8 years to figure out how to do it better. So, you know, I'm not certain in dynamic microphones there's going to be any. There will be evolution, but probably not revolution. But hey, I've been wrong so many times before that I don't even want to think about that.
All right. This is a good one. Why is it called a 55?
Boy, I tell you, I wish I knew. You know, I can tell you historically, we used the number 5 for dynamic microphones. We used the number 3 for ribbon microphones, starting the number. 4 were controlled magnetics. We didn't use 6 because Electrovoice used that. We used 1 for carbons. We used 2 for ceramics. Where that got started, who knows? I've never been able to find that. You know, maybe 55 sounded cool. It's certainly, Mr. Shure wasn't 55 years old when it came out. He was actually 37 years old. I don't know. I do know that some people ask me about the 57 and 58. Well, we had the 55 that was established. Our first SM microphone was the 56. Then we brought out the SM57, then the SM58. So that was just sequential. That was pretty simple. How we got started with that first 5.5, don't know. May have just rolled off the tongue and sounded good. Another great question. Never been able to find it.
Next question is actually for me, believe it or not. The Super 55 for this broadcast sounds excellent. What is the basic interface setup? My setup is super simple because fortunately it's just me. I don't need to mix or anything. So I am using an MVI. It's a single channel interface. Let me see. I think I can maybe lift it up and show it to you right here. So this is in our Motive line. It's a single channel interface. It's got one-touch DSP settings, mic gain control, and headphone volume control right on the unit. It has direct headphone monitoring on the back. I actually have my Zoom recorder plugged into it to record a redundant audio track that's a little bit of a better audio quality than what we get from the GoToWebinar archives. And it can connect via USB or Lightning to a mobile device. It has phantom power, so if you are using a condenser microphone, you can power a condenser microphone with phantom power off the unit. It's a great device. If you already own microphones and you're looking for a way to interface those simply with your computer or mobile device, go for the MVI. It's a great tool in the toolbox, and it's super simple.
And heavy duty too. I mean, it feels.
Yeah, I always say, you can record with it, and if the zombie apocalypse breaks out, you can chuck it at something. So it's definitely multi-purpose.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. Was this microphone an inspiration for some other microphone models?
Oh yeah. I mean, you mean other companies? Electro Voice made one that looked like that. Turner made one that looked like that. There are some current models made by some Chinese companies that look like that. As we have a trademark on it, we defend that pretty soon. But for example, if you make a microphone like that and you add an extra rib, then we can't go after it. So it has to be an exact copy of it. But yes, there's some other companies that were have definitely copied it.
Okay, let's see. Just somebody was mentioning that answer ID is not working, so I will make sure to include a link to download that document there. And then someone else mentioned that there was a link to build the Unidyne out of paper, so a little papercraft project, which is something we did.
Yeah.
We did the 75 anniversary. I will also try to remember to include a link to that.
It's still up. And by the way, I tried that. Right before we went on air here, I tried Google Shure answer ID 2715. Got these spaces, by the way. Shure space answer space ID space 2715, and it worked.
And if that doesn't work for you, I will make sure to include the link in the follow-up email too. So look for that at the end of this week, early next week. At the
but
latest.
the paper one is still up there. I saw it the other day.
Yeah, you can make various models with it. It's got a couple of different options there, and it's kind of fun. And I seem to remember you guys back when you were with the support team made a giant one.
Rick Waller did. Yes. Huge.
Yes.
It was like 1 foot by 2 foot.
Yeah, he made it out of like poster board. It was pretty funny.
Hysterical.
All right.
We still have it in the archive.
All right. Let's see. So now we have some sort of. It looks like most of the remaining questions are kind of off topic, but since we're here, are you willing to? All right.
Sure. That's right.
Right.
Where am I going to go? Home?
So there's a series of questions from a specific person about our stereo mics. Can you discuss the advent of the VP88M- stereo mic?
Yeah, MS. Yeah.
MS, thank you.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, because I was part of the project team for that. So the VP88 mid-side microphone was, oh man, I'm gonna be guessing here. Seemed to me that was probably late 80s, early 90s. Mid-side recording is just a fabulous technique, and if listeners are not familiar with it, take a look at mid-side recording. Basically, what you've got is you have a forward-facing cardioid mic, and then you have a side-facing bidirectional microphone. And by taking those two capsules and combining them through what's called a matrix, you can basically create almost any stereo pattern you want, a very wide stereo pattern, a very narrow stereo pattern. In fact, what most people do is they record the mid and the side separately, and then during post-production, they combine it through a matrix to produce whatever stereo mix they want, or width, I should say, that they want. It was used a lot for movies because, for example, you didn't know if the final shot was going to be a close-up or a wide shot, and you could change that aspect of it there. So we, on the Vp88, we made it operating by phantom power or by an internal battery. That's still the same. We also had built a matrix in it. So if you didn't want to deal with the M&S post-production aspect of it, you could come out with what we call a narrow image, a medium image, or a very wide image, and have it come out left and right stereo as well. 5-pin connector, wonderful microphone, and has sold very well over the years. So I believe we still make it. I'm not in sales anymore, but I'm pretty certain it's still a current model.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Not inexpensive, probably around $1,000 now. But the whole mid-side thing is, if you're not familiar with it, mid-side is just a way cool technique.
Well, and the Mbta Plus, which is actually kind of takes its name from the Vp88, is also a mid-side. It's a portable recording microphone that you can use with iOS devices and some Android, and sometimes with laptops as well. And it's great, and it's super cool because there's a free app that you can use to change which polar pattern you're engaging, and you can also do your own raw mid-side recording and do your own imaging as you
exactly. So the app basically does what a hardware matrix used to do.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's cool. Same concept though.
Was that Vp88 our first foray into stereo?
Yeah, our first stereo microphone. Yes, I mean we were into stereo in the 1950s with phonograph cartridges. So if the answer is that our first stereo microphone? Yes, it wasn't our first stereo. We actually made SM81s, of course, have been used as a stereo pair. But if you're talking about a single microphone that does stereo outputs, the Vp88 was the first. Yes.
Okay. There's a couple of questions here about the history of ribbon mics and requests for us to do a presentation on ribbon mics. I don't know if we have time to go into the history of Shure ribbon mics right now, but we'll
good idea, though.
Yeah, it's definitely something we'll look at, planning. Yeah. I think there was a good response to this presentation, so maybe we'll do some additional ones moving forward.
Yeah, well, and I'll throw in a pitch, too. Tomorrow I'm actually premiering a history of the SM58. Which is going to be done through our office in Nashville. But if the readers would like, or listeners would like that, write into the Shure Audio Institute and say, hey, let's do the SM58 history, and we can do that one.
And I believe you're also doing the presentation on Friday that we're doing for SM58 Day, correct?
Right. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
That's what I meant. Not tomorrow. Yes.
So yeah, that's actually going to be a live stream event on the Shure YouTube channel at 3 p.m. Central Time. And you can find information about that at shure.com/webinars. You can also find information about that on our Facebook page. But yeah, it's going to be a great presentation. We're going to be talking about the SM58. Michael's going to go into the history of it. We've got some very, very special guests, including a good friend of Shure, Henry Rollins. So, if you want some Shure mic talk and history, tune in on Friday, YouTube Live at 3 p.m.
Right. So anybody can tune into that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly.
Oh, cool.
It will be live streamed. So, yep.
Okay, great.
You don't even have to register. There is a place to register in advance, but on the day of, we'll also be sharing the YouTube link. So,
okay.
All right. Let's see. What else? Okay, you mentioned the SM7B. What's the difference between the SM7 and the SM7B?
That's easy because I was involved in that. I've been around at Shure for a long time. SM7 came out in 1973. SM7A came out in the mid-'80s because of a change at radio stations. So first of all, you got to realize that for years, the SM7 was pretty much a voiceover microphone for radio and TV, sometimes used in the studio, most famously for Michael Jackson's Thriller album. But in the 80s, radio stations started to replace paper copy in front of the announcers with a CRT tube, basically a computer screen. And those computer screens put out a local magnetic field that would cause hum and buzz in the microphone. So we had to add a humbucking coil into the SM7, and that's when it became the SM7A. The SM7B came out around 2000, 2001, approximately. Only difference, it's an SM7A with another windscreen, the big fat bulbous windscreen that people like. And the reason we did that was we had a microphone at one time called an SM5, which was very popular in radio stations. And I think the primary reason it was popular is that people liked the way it looked and it had this big, round, bulbous windscreen on it. So we basically recreated a version of that to make an SM7 look like an SM5, and that's where the SM7B is. So again, that microphone will be 50 years old in 2023, and it is more popular than ever, just as a microphone that just continues every year to sell more and more.
Great. Then let's see. You mentioned the KSM8. Can you highlight what is so good about the KSM8?
KSM8 is very interesting. The biggest thing was that people wanted to have, particularly pro sound audio guys, front of house guys, wanted to have an SM58 type of sound, but without as much proximity effect. And proximity effect is the bass buildup that you get when you get close to a directional microphone. And it's hard to get rid of proximity effect and still make a microphone sound the same. So it's basically a microphone that has two diaphragms in it. I cannot explain to you acoustically how it works. There are papers on it. I tell you how to read it. But basically, it's a microphone that has the sound and quality of an SM58, the feedback rejection, but not the amount of bass buildup, the proximity effect. So as the front of house guys like to say, it has a good working range. You can work it 2 inches away, you can work it 6 inches away, and the sound's essentially the same. And they love that because then they don't have to worry about the people being close on mic all the time. It took a lot of development to come out, including things like drilling holes in the diaphragm with little lasers. I mean, it's astonishing the technology behind it. But it's a great. Oh, you got one. There you go.
I do. It's actually my microphone of choice. I use it for performance.
Why do you like it? Tell us.
Well, it just, okay, and this is something that a lot of singers have said, it just makes me sound like I think I sound. You know how sometimes with a microphone you get on it, and especially people that maybe don't sing on microphones a lot, and they're just like, that's not what I sound like. There's something about the SM58 that's just so accurate. So I like it that way. Another fun anecdote about it. I used to sing in a band, or I do sing in a band with another female singer. And she and I are very, very different in our tonalities of our voices. I have a very bright, edgy voice. So I tend to like a microphone that's got a little bit more of a warmer round sound, like an SM58. She has a very dark, boomy tone to her voice, so she always prefers to more use like a Beta 58 or something with a little brighter. When the KSM8 came out, we both started using it. It's kind of the great equalizer too. And it's also been the mic I typically use for most of my webinars and most of my conference calls, and I get a ton of compliments. As a matter of fact, I was on a call with somebody high up in our sales department, and they IM'd me, and they're like, "Are you using an SM7B? You sound great." And I'm like, "Nope, I'm using a KSM8." So it's a great mic.
Also used by Pope Francis.
That is true. That is very true.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. I think we have a few more questions. We're kind of generally getting off topic a little bit, so we probably won't get to all of these. And if we do have a question that's off topic that we don't get to, please feel free you can email support@shure.com. If it's specifically about mic history, you can just ask them to direct it to Michael, the historian. They'll know who that is. Trust me. Yep. You can also, if you don't want to send an email, you can also go to shure.com/contact. We have a contact form there that you can fill out to get in touch with that same team. And once again, if you reference for Michael, the historian, it will get directed to him. But that team is great. They can answer so many questions across so many different audio topics. They're just a great group of guys and gals. So, all right, let's see. I have an SM5. Any chance of bringing it back?
No. So let me tell you. Okay, SM5 owners, man, they're just fabulous. They love them. But let me tell you the realities of the SM5. We sold the SM5 from approximately 1964 to about 1984, about 20 years. In no year did we ever sell more than 200. It just was, it just was not a big seller, no matter what, because there really wasn't that many people that would buy it. Radio stations would buy them and they would take care of them. It wasn't sold to the average public and so forth. And it cost us a fortune to make. And it was just never a big seller. And boy, the people that like those, they are just so loyal to that microphone. And it was basically it's basically a Unidyne 3. Basically a Unidyne 3 with a larger back end and very similar to what an SM7 is inside. So I can only tell you that, it's the SM7 sells thousands and thousands of times more than the SM5 did. So it was never a big seller for us, even at the height of its popularity, never more than 200 mics a year.
Great.
Sorry.
Is the Unidyne 4 the same capsule as the SM7?
Unidyne 4. Now, that's interesting. I did a big research project into that because there was a change from Unidyne 1 to Unidyne 2 was a big change. Unidyne 2 to Unidyne 3 was a big change. And I'm thinking Unidyne 4, by the way, for those of you who don't know, that came out in the late 60s and was around for about 10 years. I'm thinking, wow, what is this? And I look at the data sheets and I look inside and dang, it looks just like a Unidyne 3. Eventually, I got together with the engineers and we took one apart. It's nothing but a Unidyne 3 with a different grill on it. How I can only say that someone in our marketing department must have said, let's call it a Unidyne 4. Historically, it bothers me because there was not any change in the actual microphone. So all Unidyne 4 is, which is a 548, model 548, is nothing but a Unidyne 3 with a metal grill on it.
All right.
Nothing else. Yeah.
All right. I'm just going to present one more question, and it's actually for me. Are more Shure Live webinars planned? This one has been great. Well, thank you so much. We're glad you enjoyed it.
You.
And yes,
I've enjoyed it.
We have a lot of webinars going on right now. We understand that people are looking for sort of online learning opportunities, and we're here to help you. We do weekly webinars on Wednesdays at 11 o'clock, hosted by me. So you can view those. Our pro team has also been doing a lot of webinars. They have been doing some weekly tech talks on the first and third Tuesday of the month. And then they're also doing some workflow series webinars on Fridays at noon, I think. But if you go to shure.com/webinars, you can see all of our upcoming scheduled sessions. And we will be expanding that schedule as we continue on. So please feel free to keep an eye there and sign up for them. And we'll hopefully see you on the next one.
Thanks, Cheryl, and thanks to all the listeners. It was great. This is great fun for me. Let's do another one.
Got it.
Let's play too.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you learned a little something today. I know I always do. And we will see you on the next one. Have a great day, everybody.
Right.